Week 11 fantasy football running back tier list. This is where we go through my top 36 running back rankings, helping you guys set your fantasy football lineups, going through everything from injuries to usage to recent trends and buy lows and my start of the week, and all that good stuff will be covered in today's video. Leave a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new around here. Now let's get into it. All right, so to kick things off, we do have a couple major fantasy running backs on bye. You will be without Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, Alvin Kamara, Ramondre Stevenson, and Tyler Algier with the Colts, Falcons, Saints, and Patriots on bye. So going to have to dig a little bit deeper here, see what we can do in our flex spots and in our RB2 spots if you guys are down some running back production this week. I actually happen to have JT and Bijan in one of my leagues, so I'm going to be really digging deep this week. In the will they play tier, so some of the major injuries that we have to discuss, we have one really big lingering question mark and then another kind of big lingering question mark, and then two guys already listed as either doubtful or ruled out. So kicking things off with Devon Achane, he is coming back from IR with that knee injury that he suffered a couple weeks ago. 3 straight days of a limited participation in practice. Achane has been on the IR for the last 5 weeks, 4 games in total, because the Dolphins had their bye week last week. His practice window was opened up before the bye. We heard reports that, he should be good to go and he should be 100%, but he hasn't been officially ruled active for this week. So there is a possibility that he's limited, or maybe he plays and, doesn't get that many snaps, or maybe he's out altogether. So definitely a situation to monitor. If you have Achane, I would start him as a top 10 to 12 running back, assuming he plays. But I will say, if you're on the cautious side of things, maybe he's more so in that RB 15 to 20 range. And of course, if we hear any kind of pitch count stuff, he would probably drop down a little bit more than that. Dameon Pierce, the ankle injury that he suffered a couple weeks ago is still bothering him. He did not practice Wednesday or Thursday, did get in a limited practice on Friday, but he has since been ruled out for Sunday's game. So it looks like it will be another Devin Singletary game. Definitely fire him up this week. Alexander Mattison dealing with a concussion right now. He suffered that in last week's game, did not practice Wednesday, limited participation in practice on Thursday, and did actually practice in full on Friday. According to the data from FB Injury Doc, only about 35% of running backs that suffer a concussion one week, the following week, only 35% of them actually clear the protocol and actually end up playing. So he has a good chance of playing. He does have a little bit of extra time with it being a Sunday night football game. So tentatively, I do have Ty Chandler ranked higher, but I will say it looks like we might be trending towards Alexander Mattison being active for this game. And in that case, I'll talk about it once I get to Ty Chandler. But basically, Mattison would just swap right into his spot. And then the last injury that's going to affect these rankings is Antonio Gibson, who is dealing with a toe injury right now. It's something that he's been dealing with for years now. Did not practice all week. Turf toe has been a problem for him, and he is listed officially as doubtful. He probably will get ruled out at some point when you guys are watching this on Saturday. So I have upgraded Brian Robinson, and I will talk about how good of a start he actually is this week. So let's kick things off here in the actual tier list with my locked-in running back starts, going through my top 12 running backs, all the RB1s for the week, briefly talking about who has good matchups, who has bad matchups, and what to expect from these guys, because all of these guys are in your lineup. I'm sure you guys aren't really deciding between these guys, but as far as who could overperform and who could underperform, some of the guys here that have great matchups, we have Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, Aaron Jones, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard. For the love of God, please get back on track, Tony Pollard, Austin Eckler, Raheem Mostert, and Breece Hall. All of these guys have pretty favorable matchups, so maybe hope for a big game out of those top-end RB1s for your team. Some of these guys that are in elite high-scoring game environments as well, also very good for our fantasy running backs. Both of those Lions running backs implied for a lot of points. Josh Jacobs in that Dolphins game, that should be a high-scoring game. Tony Pollard and the Cowboys are implied for a lot of points against the Panthers. Kenneth Walker in a high-scoring game environment against the Rams. Raheem Mostert and the Dolphins are implied for the highest point total of 30 on the entire week, so he's in a really good spot. And then DeAndre Swift and the Eagles. I don't know if that game is going to be really high scoring necessarily, but it's Chiefs and Eagles. It's a rematch of the Super Bowl. Of course, that was a high scoring game, so it's possible we get some points there. And then elite running backs who have bad matchups, so maybe you want to temper expectation for guys like Christian McCaffrey going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Travis Etienne going up against the Tennessee Titans, DeAndre Swift. On the ground, he might not be very efficient against the Chiefs. They've been really good against the run. And then Kenneth Walker here. Also, a tough matchup there against the Rams. So I typically like to highlight a guy or two in this tier that I want to talk about their usage, or maybe they're a buy low. The first guy I want to highlight here is DeAndre Swift, who is my RB6 on the week. He's such a sketchy buy because it seems like he could get hurt at any moment, knowing what we know about DeAndre Swift. But I will say the Eagles are using him in such a way that should keep him healthy. He's not really going over 60, 70% of the snaps. He's not getting, 25 touches a game. He's gotten so unlucky in the red zone this year. 9 inside the 5 attempts, just 2 touchdowns. And I'm a believer in this Eagles offense. I really do think down the stretch they can turn things on. We've seen Jalen Hurts kind of dealing with some injuries. The big plays, the long rushing touchdowns haven't really been there. And I do think that's an element of their offense that we might see at the end of the season. The Chiefs are a really tough defense this week, top 3 in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. But DeAndre Swift has a top half of the league matchup the rest of the way. Other than the Cowboys game in week 14 and the Chiefs game this week, the rest of the way he is in favorable matchups essentially for the rest of the season. And in the fantasy playoffs, it's going to be a bonanza of scoring. So DeAndre Swift is a really good buy low into the fantasy playoffs right now. My running back 12 for me, the other guy I want to highlight within this top 12 area, is Raheem Mostert, because we don't really know what the situation is going to be with Devon Achane. We don't know if he's going to play, if he's going to play and be limited, if he's going to not play. Regardless, I think with Raheem Mostert, he's still a great start no matter what. There's room in this backfield for Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane to both be RB1s this week against the Raiders. The Raiders are 23rd against fantasy running backs, and if Achane were to be out, I would actually have Raheem Mostert all the way up inside my top 5 running backs. So if you have Raheem Mostert, you definitely want to start him this week, especially if we hear anything about Achane being limited or Achane getting actually ruled out. He is going to be a great option. So kicking off my high-end RB2s, and we go a little bit more in depth with these guys and their usage, is Joe Mixon, who actually played on Thursday Night Football already, performed really well with 21 PPR points, his best game of the season so far in fantasy, scored through the air on that touchdown from Joe Burrow. It was not an easy matchup, so kudos to Joe Mixon, but he did get there for his best game of the season. So hopefully if you guys had Joe Mixon on Thursday Night Football, you didn't have any other players in that game, because for the most part, Mixon was the only one who actually performed. But RB14, we have Brian Robinson. As I talked about, Antonio Gibson is doubtful. Ergo, Brian Robinson is my start of the week, and he has a ton going for him this week. Big game last week, right? He's coming off of a big game, should have his confidence high. Giants defense, 27th against fantasy running backs and adjusted fantasy points allowed, so it's an easy matchup. Just had a good game. The time of possession battle will probably be easily won by the Washington Commanders, because we know what Tommy DeVito is going to do on the other side of the ball, which is get 3 and outs and fail to generate first downs. I'm sure the time of possession and the, grind the clock out carries will be plentiful for Brian Robinson this week at home against Tommy DeVito and the Giants. And like I said, the cherry on top is that Antonio Gibson's not going to play for the most part. He's listed as doubtful. I'm sure we're going to get some work from Chris Rodriguez, and he's going to work in, maybe takes away the long down and distance snaps or whatever. But Brian Robinson is in a great spot to smash this week. So if you have him, definitely want to have him into my lineup because he is a great play. Running back 15 for me on the week is James Conner. Also a really good buy low right now if you guys are looking for running back production. We didn't quite see the big game with Kyler Murray back on the field, but this Texans-Cardinals game is expected to be very, very high scoring. 49-point over-under this week against Houston, and that is the highest on the slate. The Texans are also the 4th easiest running back matchup in the NFL, so it's a good matchup. It's a good game environment. He has Kyler Murray back. Kyler also had a game already to knock off the rust. Buy James Conner while you still can, because this could be a breakout game for him, and he also, like DeAndre Swift, has a really favorable schedule down the stretch, and if Kyler and the offense can really pick things up, we're going to get borderline RB1 production out of James Conner for the rest of the year. So running back 16 for me is Javonte Williams. The volume has been absolutely absurd for Javonte. You guys can see it on the screen there. 63 carries in the last 3 games, 11 targets. He's officially back. He's officially their bell cow running back, and this Broncos offense has honestly been pretty competent all year, and now their defense is actually playing better, and they shut down Josh Allen last week. They shut down Patrick Mahomes before the bye week in back-to-back games. The Vikings are a strong run defense, so it's going to be a tough matchup for Javonte, but Javonte is a really strong volume play. So 5th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position are the Vikings, so not an easy matchup, but I do think he is going to be a really, really solid volume play for you guys this week. Running back 17 is Rachaad White. Speaking of strong volume plays, Rachaad White has been a top 12 running back in fantasy points the last 4 straight games. So he has been on fire recently. He is RB8 on the season right now. The 49ers seem probably a lot more intimidating than they actually are to fantasy running backs. They've been about average in terms of what they allow in adjusted fantasy points allowed and rush defense DVOA to the running back position. I think this is another solid week upcoming for Rachaad White, who has really turned it on, especially as a receiver since the Buccaneers bye. He's consistently getting, 3, 4, 5, 6 targets a game. He's doing the most with those targets because that was his best skill set coming out of Arizona State. And I really like what I'm seeing out of Rachaad White. I still think he's a decent sell high in case you want to go after somebody better, like a DeAndre Swift, for example, or somebody like that. But I do think he is a great play this week against San Francisco. Running back 18 for me on the week is Isaiah Pacheco. Best usage of the year by far pre-bye for Isaiah Pacheco. He clocked in 70% of the team snaps, which is his best of the season. He'd be way higher on this list, damn near the RB1 range, if he wasn't facing the Philadelphia Eagles, who are pretty much the best run defense in football. Between them and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Eagles are first in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running back, so they are really locked down against fantasy RBs, and they're second in DVOA to fantasy running backs as well. So only the Bucs have been basically as dominant as the Philadelphia Eagles up front, and Pacheco probably needs to score to hit this week because I don't anticipate a 100-yard rushing day or some kind of dominant rushing performance against a defense that has been one of the stingiest in the NFL. And I actually really don't like this game to shoot out, even though I think it's possible because the Chiefs and Eagles can both score points. I actually think this might be a lower scoring game than people anticipate on Monday night. So now let's get into the low-end RB2s here, and it's pretty crazy that I'm kicking off low-end RB2s with Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. This is the world we're living in right now. It is headlined by two guys that were drafted in the second round of fantasy football drafts, but Derrick Henry is bad in bad game scripts, and that's the bottom line with him. We've seen it all season. The Jacksonville Jaguars present a bad game script for the Tennessee Titans. They're 7-point favorites. They're at home, and Will Levis, outside of his 4-touchdown performance a few weeks ago, has been pretty average at quarterback, and he's not really propelling this offense more than, let's say, Ryan Tannehill would have been before. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are also top 12 against the run. So with Derrick Henry, I think, you're getting 15 uninspiring carries out of him. And if the Jags get ahead early, he could be completely phased out of this game script, and we could see a lot of Tajay Spears. And we've seen Derrick Henry play sub 50% of the snaps in back-to-back games this year. And we've seen 4 games this season where Derrick Henry has failed to hit 50% of the snaps, and he's been relatively boom or bust as a result of that. And this is one of those games I think he probably won't get there unless he scores a touchdown, which is, of course, always possible with Derrick Henry, but I don't like the outlook this week. Running back 20 for me on the week, like I said, very weird to say running back 20 Saquon Barkley, but he's the same story for the most part. The Commanders have been a lot worse against the run versus fantasy running backs since trading away, Chase Young and Montez Sweat, and you could definitely argue that Saquon has a good matchup for that reason, but it's still Tommy DeVito, man. This offense can't generate first downs, let alone touchdowns. They can't generate first downs and stay on the field and not go 3 and out, not turn the ball over. Saquon has a great workload, but 15 touches for 60 yards against the Cowboys is exactly what I thought would happen, and I think we're going to see something similar this week because it's just so difficult for one player, and that player being a running back, to carry an entire offense when his offensive line isn't playing well, the coaching, play calling is not the greatest in the world, the quarterback is not an NFL starter or even an NFL backup quality of quarterback. Not a great situation for Saquon. If you can leave him on your bench in favor of some other options, definitely do it. And I really debated putting this next guy over Saquon Barkley. And honestly, gun to my head, I might actually start him over Saquon. I have running back 21 here, Devin Singletary. With Dameon Pierce ruled out for Sunday's game, it probably will be the last one that we get of Devin Singletary being the workhorse running back for this team. But only the Lions running backs have an easier matchup this week on the slate. 29th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position are the Arizona Cardinals, and 23rd in rush defense DVOA to running back. So Devin Singletary had a great workload against the Bucs, didn't really get there from a fantasy perspective. Last week, nobody probably played him because he didn't get there in week 9, but he had a monster game against the Cincinnati Bengals, had the ball like 30 times. He carried the ball for like 150 yards. Imagine what he could do potentially this week against a terrible run defense in a game environment that we expect a lot of points in, 49-point over-under. Could be another big game for Devin Singletary and the Houston Texans offense. Running back 22 for me is Jerome Ford. The Steelers are a really good defense up front, but this is Dorian Thompson-Robinson starting this game. So I'm not overly excited about starting Jerome Ford. And this game also has a 33-point over-under, which is one of the lowest we've seen this entire season. I really don't want to start anybody from this game, let alone Jerome Ford. But I suppose the argument you could make for Jerome Ford being a decent play this week
is that with DTR at quarterback, they're probably going to need to lean on Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt and give them a lot of carries. So basically with Ford, you're kind of hoping for like a 15 carry for 45 yards. Maybe he breaks off a long one or scores a touchdown. That's basically how he gets there. So I don't think he's actually a terrible play, but I'm not really excited about playing Jerome Ford either. So Keaton Mitchell locked into my rankings at RB23. Everybody got themselves all hot and bothered about Keaton Mitchell, including me to some degree, because I ranked him all the way up here at RB23, and that's why he's locked in here. But I saw some crazy shit. People saying that they were going to play him over Mostert and Jacobs and Pollard and stuff like that. I definitely did not go that far. Hopefully you didn't play Keaton Mitchell over somebody that was a way better start-sit option like I have ranked the way I have it here. Guy had like 9 touches for 40 yards. So if you guys had him on Thursday Night Football, apologies, but you're going to have to definitely dig deep and make some good decisions here. Running back 24, closing out this tier of the rankings, we have James Cook. And the Jets are much stronger versus the pass than they are against the run. So I think James Cook actually is well set up to potentially have a decent performance here. Sneaky underrated nugget with James Cook as well is that Joe Brady is the new offensive coordinator of this team since the team fired Ken Dorsey this past week. And if you guys know anything about Joe Brady, he was the architect of the 2019 LSU offense that Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, all these guys were a part of. And I mean, maybe I could have engineered that offense given the talent that they had. But the one thing that I think is really sneaky for Joe Brady is that he got the best out of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was actually my comparison for James Cook coming out of Georgia. And I think they have very similar skill sets. So maybe we're going to see more screen passes, more dump off passes to James Cook, because that would actually really help his fantasy football value. If he was being used like Rachaad White right now, we could be talking about a guy that's like a mid RB2 in this offense. And if the Bills can figure their shit out and actually start scoring some points, then we get the benefit that James Cook plays for the Buffalo Bills offense. So I actually think he's not a terrible buy low right now. If you guys look at his game logs, the last 6 games, he's got games of like 5 PPR points, 7 PPR points, 8 and 8. Like he's had 2 games of RB2 or better production in the last 6 weeks. So he has not been really good recently, but I do think that James Cook could actually get back on track with this offensive coordinator switch. So getting into the flex plays, and then we'll rattle off the deep league flexes and get out of here. RB25, I have Darrell Henderson. Last week without Kyron Williams, I would anticipate, because he is eligible to come off IR next week. But Rams versus Seahawks has a high point total, and Henderson is a decent flex play as a result. It looks like when you look at the usage that Royce Freeman is getting a lot of the short down and distance work, and that means that if they're inside the red zone, maybe Royce Freeman takes away those touches. But Darrell Henderson, it looks like, is the primary back here, at least for this week, so he's an okay play against the Seattle Seahawks. Running back 26 in my rankings is tentatively Ty Chandler, because like I said earlier in the video, we don't know what Alexander Madison's status is going to be for Sunday Night Football, but he did get in a full practice, and he is officially listed as questionable. So I actually think it's more likely that he plays than not. But here's how I see this shaking out in terms of where I would rank these guys, because Denver, as we know, is a terrible run defense, or at least they have been a terrible run defense in recent weeks. But Ty Chandler is a top 25 guy if Alexander Madison is out for this game, and he is a great play in that case. But if Alexander Madison plays, then Alexander Madison is probably a top 28 play, because he's coming off a concussion. I don't want to rank him quite as high as I would rank Ty Chandler alone in this backfield. But I do think even if Alexander Madison plays, you could desperation flex Ty Chandler as a top 36 play. So that's kind of how the rankings would shake up depending on all those scenarios, but we'll have to wait and see, and obviously tune into our Sunday morning live stream, because we should know more at that point in time, although this is a Sunday night game, so we might not know up until 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Sunday night. So Jalen Warren is my RB27. I can kind of group in Najee Harris at RB29 here as well. We kind of know what the split is now between these two guys. We know that it's like 55-45 in terms of snaps for Najee to Warren. They've actually produced at a pretty high level, both of them, the last few weeks. They've gotten 7 RB2 or better performances the last 4 games. So of the 8 total performances, 7 times we've had Jalen Warren inside the top 24 running backs and Najee Harris inside the top 24 running backs. So that's great news if you have these guys. They've been really consistent. They've been solid floor plays. But the Browns matchup is tough and the game environment sucks. And neither of these guys, because they cannibalize each other, are huge ceiling plays for the most part. So they're more so like flex plays. They're not guys that I want to be throwing in as like my RB2s or whatever. I would much rather play a volume play like Singletary or Ford or somebody like that. RB28 for me here is Chuba Hubbard, who saw a spike down in his usage from Miles Sanders this past week. We saw the split get a little bit more balanced out. We'll see if that trend continues, because for a while there, Chuba Hubbard was like the main back here. But it could become a full-fledged timeshare in the next couple of weeks. And if Chuba doesn't maintain that job, then these guys are basically both non-startable. But either way, neither guy is really appealing in this matchup. Against the Dallas Cowboys, I don't want to play Chuba Hubbard. But if you had to play somebody from this backfield, it would be him. And it's possible that he has 15 to 20 touches and finds the end zone in this game. I just don't really love the game environment, nor do I love the matchup. Running back 30, closing out this area of the rankings, is Khalil Herbert. And right now, I'm cautiously ranking the Bears' backfield because I have no idea what the split's going to look like. With Detroit, they're a good run defense, so that's a negative against this backfield altogether. And I don't know if Khalil Herbert, coming off a multi-week injury, coming off of IR, is going to be fully cleared, fully ready to go, and the full-fledged bell cow here, because D'Onta Foreman has played well in his absence. He's actually questionable coming into this game. And then how does Roschon Johnson factor into this? So I have no idea what to expect from this backfield. If you had to start somebody, I would start Khalil Herbert. I'd say, if you can, though, avoid this backfield. Let it, play out a week, see how the split looks with everybody back healthy. But Herbert is the best option in this backfield. So closing this video out with the rest of my top 36, RBs 31 to 36. These are all just deep league flexes. If you have to start these guys, you're probably down bad with bye weeks or whatever, or your team maybe isn't good enough to make the playoffs or make the championship. So if you need a deep league desperation flex, I think Zach Charbonnet is a not bad option. High scoring game environment. We've seen the snap share the last couple weeks. It's been pretty solid. RB 32 in my rankings locked in was actually Gus Edwards, who I didn't think would be a great play this week because I thought Keaton Mitchell would take over this backfield and get a lot more work, but he actually scored 2 touchdowns. So if you played Gus Edwards, hopefully you played him higher than RB32 because he had a great performance, and that's definitely on me. But RB32 is about where I projected him. RB33 for me on the week is D'Onta Foreman. Like I said, fine desperation play because we don't know the split, but I would like to avoid this backfield if I can. Kareem Hunt, like I said with Ford, just hope for a lot of touches with a rookie quarterback. So maybe Kareem Hunt has like 15 touches in this game. Tajay Spears, negative game script potentially against Jacksonville. That's the appeal with him there. And then running back 36, closing out this video, is A.J. Dillon. Chargers run defense is bad, so maybe you could throw A.J. Dillon in there. Maybe he'll punch in a touchdown. Maybe he'll get 15 carries, whatever the case is. So if you guys didn't see earlier today's video, I did it with Matt Harmon. If you guys are Dynasty players, we broke down the entire rookie class basically and how they've performed to this point in the season. He wrote up an article charting their reception perception numbers. So you definitely going to want to check that video out if you guys are Dynasty fantasy football players. If you have Addison, if you have Zay Flowers, if you have Puka Nacua, if you have any of these guys, definitely check that video out. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, check out our site for everything that we got going on over there, all of our bonus content, rest of season rankings, weekly rankings, dynasty rankings, all that stuff up to date as of this week. So if you want to check out all that stuff, that is available on our site, flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE for 30% off any of the packages, as well as 6 months for free if you sign up for an annual membership. And if you sign up for an annual membership, you'll get, number one, all of the great benefits and all the great new tools that we're building this offseason for the site. And two, you'll also get a free Zoom consultation with myself or with Danny. Talk about whatever you want to talk about fantasy football wise, getting ready for your fantasy playoffs, dynasty fantasy football talk, best ball stuff, whatever you want to talk about, we'll have you covered there. And also make sure to check out our sponsors, Underdog Fantasy, promo code FSE for 100% back. Do some pick'ems this week, get some skin in the game. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.